Every collaboration starts with an introduction, a moment in time where the stars align at the right place, at the right time, and with the right people. It's the connections we make with one another that form the foundation upon which we build our future. Put simply, it's the start of something new. And when we take those first steps toward positive change, toward our hopes and dreams, we treat the connections we make with care. Because with years of experience, we've learned that the path we choose is not nearly as important as those who walk it with us. No matter the end goal, the trust we choose to put in others is the biggest investment we can make for our future. The Capricorn Group has been walking beside dreamers since 1982, connecting them with the right people and solutions to turn their ambition into opportunity. And it all started with an introduction. Capricorn, we are stronger together.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Capricorn Group's Inspire session. Thank you so much for joining us here. It's a beautiful day. I'm sure we can all attest to that. Very nice and cloudy. For me, it feels like deja vu today because not so long ago, we had numerous face-to-face Inspire sessions similar to this one. However, we reverted to digital platforms over the last year due to the pandemic. Today, however, we are embracing a hybrid event and catering to you, our physical guests, as well as our virtual guests. So this is streaming live, so welcome to both audiences. I'm sure we can all relate that the last more or less 2 years has not been the easiest. The pandemic altered our way of living significantly, and many people have lost loved ones, and others struggle to cope with various challenges brought about by the impact of the pandemic. Amidst the COVID-19 tragedy and the associated loss encountered during the last 2 years, we are left with viewing ourselves, our lives, and life in general in a different way. In search of alternative ways of living, loving, and relating to the journey ahead, we are challenged to reappraise and reevaluate our thinking and our priorities. Capricorn Group is happy to bring you this Inspire session titled Mental Strength, The Road to Rediscovery, which is guaranteed to encourage conversations of mind-shifting potential. We bring you Heidi Burmeister-Nel. I hope I said that correctly. She is a registered, highly qualified clinical psychologist. My apologies. She will shed light on our innate potential as human beings to make choices and take actions to realign our lives and shift our focus in the face of vulnerability and mortality. Heidi has been in the private practice for 16 years and consults corporate clients in Windhoek on employee-related issues and wellness. Her professional interests and practice fields include cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma, interpersonal neurobiology, relationship therapy, and adult and adolescent psychotherapy. She will guide us today in making courageous choices and pursuing meaning and purpose. Thank you so much for being here and also for tuning in to our virtual guests as well. Make sure to like, share, and tag a friend. Without further ado, please help me welcome Heidi Burmeister-Nel.
Is this thing on? Is it? Okay. Oh, it is on. Thank you very much, Grace, for the introduction. And yes, thank you very much for the Capricorn Group Limited for having me here today. It truly is a privilege standing in front of a crowd of people after the last 2 years and what we've been through. So today when we speak about moving forward and coping with loss, it really feels like I'm like trampling on sacred ground. It's very difficult to have conversations and to think about moving forward because what we have lost has been so profound and has been loved. But if we talk about loss, I think it's important to say that it is part of being. To be human is to know loss. So we cannot not go there. It's incredibly important for us to have conversations about loss and about moving forward. When I was thinking about this talk and presentation, what came up for me was a poem that we analyzed, I think in grade 6 or 7, Funeral Blues, the poem by W.H. Auden. And many of you might be familiar with the poem, but I remember what struck me about that poem was a sense of shock, urgency, a plea from the author or the poet saying, just stop life for a moment. Just allow me to process a little bit what is going on here, because my life will never ever be the same. So you can read the poem. I haven't put the full poem on the slides. But like I said, it was this realization that life will never ever be the same. And how do we continue despite that? But it's a psychological journey, it's a spiritual journey that is part of life. And there's just no way we cannot go there. We should trample on the sacred ground. So I think what is important is that there's not a field in life, whether it's the spirituality, whether it is psychology, whether it is artists, everybody has talked about loss and has tried to make sense of it. So today we're just going to try to make sense of it and find some kind of tools in our toolbox to move forward. What is incredibly important from a psychological perspective, because obviously I'm going to take a little bit more of a psychological perspective, I think a working hypothesis accepted by most psychologists is that what the subjective state of mind experiences shapes the objective mind or the brain. So I'm going to simplify that sentence by saying what it ultimately means is that our experiences in life shapes our bodies and our brain. It can change our bodies and our brain. We know that about trauma. For example, people that have gone through tremendous trauma, severe trauma, prolonged trauma, there is neurological studies that show that it really makes changes, often permanent changes on the brain. But if we know that an experience can alter the brain, then we also have to look at how the brain and how we apply the brain and the mind can possibly change our experience, because there's a correlation between the two. So my talk today is a little bit about that. It's about, yes, experience shapes us. It can change us. But we can also find a way when we apply our mind, influence our experience of things that happen to us. So it's incredibly important that we know that the brain and experience changes from moment to moment. I'm sure you all have encountered, you have got a bad day, and then something happens like your boss saying, we're giving you a raise. And in that moment, something has changed inside of your body. It might be something smaller than a raise. It might be something less profound even that can change your mood. But that shows us that our brain can change from millisecond to millisecond. But also, we see that if we are having a certain way of experience and thinking about life in a prolonged way, how that can really start shaping the brain in a more permanent way. So I think it's incredibly important to know that this is just about giving some guidance, some ideas, some tools to be able to do that, to change a little bit of what happens here in your mind in terms of dealing with the world. So when we talk about dealing with loss or the process of recovery, I think it's important to say that we don't expect anybody to be like they were before the loss. We can never be the same. We should probably not be the same. So it's not about healing, recovery to a state of where we were before. It's a journey of change and integration, and it's ultimately needed for our personal growth. So like I said, healing does not imply an end state or a fixed state. It's an ongoing process through life. People heal in different ways. People mourn in different ways. People had different losses. Some losses were probably trivial, while others were profound. And I hope some of this will give both those people with more minor losses or profound losses some tool. I think what is important then also to say, it's kind of an aid to live with loss. So when we talk about loss, I think one of the important things is we need to feel the loss. Loss needs to be felt. It's not a process we can cheat. With that, I want to say that it's a bit of a paradox, because what we're saying is we need to sit still, feel it, make time for it, reflect, pause, but that is needed to move forward in life. I think what is important is we have to oscillate between the two. When it's needed, loss needs to be felt. It needs to be integrated neurologically into our brains and bodies, because it reflects something of what was important to us, what we loved. We need to celebrate that to some degree by acknowledging and feeling that loss. And at the same time, if we would sit in pain and loss permanently, it would destroy us. We cannot sit there all the time. We need to also move forward or adapt and make certain changes to literally give ourselves a bit of a break of the pain and the suffering and the stress of loss. I often tell my clients to mourn takes a lot of energy. You need to take care of your physical body. You need to be able to tolerate loss in the body. So we also need a break from loss. We need to move towards different focuses in our life. And as I go through these processes, guidelines, I also want you to think about them not as linear. It's not step 1, step 2, step 3. They are interwoven with each other. They're not hierarchical. It's not one is more important than the other. So take from these processes what is valuable to you and disregard what is not. But reflect maybe a little bit on most of them. So important, we have to feel loss. I think, again, because we have to reflect on it and we have to feel it, because that is ultimately what is allowing life to flow again. So it's an individual journey, all humans share, and it's our journey towards healing and growth. What is very much connected to feeling is reflection, and you can see the similarities in these two processes: feeling, integrating an experience, and reflection. And what is important about reflection is we have little time for it, but it's such an important human process. It's the activity of thinking about your own feelings, about your thoughts, about your actions. And in psychology, we do a lot of reflection. It's not about mere dwelling of the past. That would be kind of senseless. It's about looking at the past through different eyes, with a bit of a different perspective, and ultimately to make sense. Because the past is crucial for how we live in the present. I often think about the analogy of training for something like the Desert Dash. What you have done and what is past is essential for your ability in the moment. So if you haven't done all those trainings, what you are capable of now is probably going to be limited. And it's very important for your present training to influence your capacity in the future. And to me, there's a psychological similarity. The past is there like valuable treasures, knowledge, understanding, and insight for our present moment. It helps and guides the present moment. So the past should not be lost. It should really be integrated through the process of reflection. And as you can see there in this quote by Blaise Pascal, most of man's trouble comes from his inability to be still, to just make time to be still and to reflect. So ultimately we change over time. The me 10 years ago and the me pre-COVID is not the me now. Many of you have lost many things and have lost loved ones. Your life cannot be the same. So reflect on it in order to gain the knowledge and the skills. Process and integrations. Make sense. Learn from mistake. This is a crucial aspect an ability that human beings have. I think what is also important, and this is a very valuable quote from Jung, is until you make the unconscious processes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So this quote was so profound because it's important that we understand if we don't see the mistakes that we've made and maybe the things that we did and could have done differently, again, we will not see our own patterns of life play out and we can't make the adjustments. And it's not to look at yourself, your past self, with anger or to blame or to have guilt about the past. It's not about that. It's just to find the value in the past and to be able to apply it in the present. So we have to ask ourselves questions in this reflective process. The questions are, what happened to me and why did it happen? Could I have done something different? How could I have done it different? Did I need more support? What made me use my support systems or what maybe prohibited me from making use of it? What did I discover about myself, both about my strength and my possible weaknesses? How can I make amendments about that or with that? So it's very important to ask ourselves these questions. And again, I often tell my clients, it's not crazy people that speak to themselves, it's healthy people. So you need to ask yourself these questions. What is also related to this process of reflection is our values. And with our values, we are ultimately facing what is important to us. So while memories has a function of teaching us and making us learn from our mistakes, our values ultimately help us reflect on what has been important to what has dictated my life, what was the driving force of my life. So while we reflect and ask ourselves questions, a valuable question is about values. So in the process of moving forward skillfully and more wise, I think we need to understand and ask ourselves, what do we prioritize? What do we value? Because ultimately, what we value mobilizes and motivates us. So it's incredibly important to just reflect on these values. And this is the rethinking, the re-evaluating, the reorganizing of life. It's a crucial part of maturation. And it's incredibly important to know that values change. Maybe you did reflect on your values 20 years ago, but the person that you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s is not the same person. So values change over time, and it's important to see what is important to you now and why. And ultimately, the question is, does my behavior reflect my values? Values are not a value just because you say it's important to you. A value is a value when you live that value, when you act that value, when you invest your time in that value, then you can say it's a value. So it's important for us again to shift our priorities to where it should have been all along. And I think that's a gift of COVID that we maybe got during this time. It just helped most of us reflect on, are we focusing, are we valuing the things that is important? And now to reorganize and shift the focus to where it should have been all along. So with regards to values is quite interesting, but because a lot of our values have been passed down to us from our family members and cultures, and that's good. But we also should have a few self-chosen values. We need to evaluate, is that value still relevant in my life? Where is it coming from? So it's important to reflect and reorganize because, again, as I said, it's the fuel that drives us. It is what we make sacrifices for. And a lot of our emotions are linked with values because values are fundamental belief systems in our brain. They inform what we do and how we conduct our lives. So if something like family is important to you and connection is, and making people feel loved and appreciated in your family, of course, you would have been devastated when COVID hit and we could not travel or see people or reach out and physically hug our loved ones and be present with them. That's why we had so much emotions during COVID. I mean, there's many reasons why I had emotions, but it's because we could not always act out the values. But again, maybe COVID again reminded us of what is important. So values can also be context specific. What is valuable for me with my husband or with my kids and my family is not necessarily the same as my values at work. So just think a little bit about that as well. So work values, family values, friendship values might also differ. So again, ask questions about what is important, who is important, why is this important, and how am I living that? So what is important and related to values are ultimately our goals. Goals are purpose. It's what we aim at. So again, I hope you see how that fits together with values. Because in the process of reflecting about values, it brings us ultimately to the topic of purpose. And both of these are nouns. While the nouns value and purpose differ a little bit, value refers to the quality of something. It makes something desirable or good or bad. It's like integrity or honesty. While purpose is the object to be reached. It's the aim to be reached. It's very much a goal. It's an aim. It can be very much something practical. So I think what important is we always say where our attention flows, our energy goes. So this means that if we focus our attention and we have a focused goal and aim, again, our bodies and our brains will respond to what we focus on. So remember what I said earlier, if experiences shapes the brain, how the brain makes sense of something, how it pays attention to life, can change your internal feeling. So it's up to us to decide consciously and reflectively where to put our aim and our attention. We need to refocus our aim. Attention is one of our most valuable characteristics, or resources rather, and yet we don't even think about it because it shapes the quality of the time that we spend. So when it comes to psychologists, we know that people have biases in their thinking and biases in their aim. And this is a quite interesting thing about human beings. But we have a pronity to a negative aim, negative thinking. What that means is, and there's various of research about it, I'm not even going to quote some of it or any of it because otherwise we'll sit here for the whole day. But what it says is that people are generally biased towards negative thinking processes. That means if there is something happening in the world around them, the brain will naturally and often disregard neutrality or positivity and zoom in on the negative thing that has happened. So negative behaviors or events are naturally remembered easier and better and even faster. You can recall that faster. So information about, for example, a new person that you meet, you will disregard all the positive things about that person and just remember all the bad things that people said about that person. So, and people's attention span is much better when there's gossip and negativity than when there's positive things being talked about. You see that, so we are prone to negative biased thinking. There's a lot of reasons and theories about that I'm also not going to go into, but it's incredibly important to realize that about our behavior and our behavior patterns. So, because when we know we've got a tendency to negative bias, we can make a conscious shift to shift that focus and to let go of that bias and to pick it up more quickly. And this is again where reflection comes in. You can only change something if you see it. You can't change behavior. You can't change your aim or your focus if you're not aware of where it is. So most of us are even aware of that tendency to do it. The nice thing about us, we're not just negative human beings per se, we also have the ability to teach our brains something different. So optimism can be taught. It's something you can learn. So I'm very cautious when I use the word positive and optimistic. I like rather words like better perspective, clarity, rationality, because it's not just about negative and positive or pessimistic and optimistic. I don't think that's, it's as simple as that. But ultimately, I think what is important is for just to see that there is another way of seeing the world if we re-aim. So part of our understanding of resilience is also quite interesting, because when we talk about being resilient and what makes us resilient, people often think, and it's very much true, that hardship, things that we've endured, what we've been through, makes us more resilient in life, and that is ultimately true. However, in the research about resilience, it is also true that loving, kind, life, joyous experiences in our life, maybe the birth of a child, a very specific birthday party, a good transition, a new job, when you became a parent or a grandparent, family gatherings, a nice event with your friends in the Fish River Canyon. All of these events in our life can be recalled to make us more resilient. It's jewels that we can draw back on and engage with and remember to make us more resilient. So it's not always about focusing on what we've lost, but also good experiences in our lives that carry us through difficult times. And therefore, it is so important that we have to teach ourselves that skill, make us cognizant of it. When we come to actions, actions is what I say, it flows from what we value and how we direct our aim and focus towards. But actions are not just what we do. They're also about what we not do. So when we talk about actions, it's about coping. It's about strategies that we make use of to cope with certain situations. So it's an effortful, intentional response that helps us to manage, maybe master if we're lucky, or sometimes to minimize just the effect of negative experiences of loss or trauma. So it can be to manage, to minimize, or to master. But it's definitely an integral part of what we also need to focus on and look at in ourselves is how do we act? Because what you can see there is that we have adaptive coping. This is strategies that helps us grow. It might sometimes be difficult to engage in, but it's activities where we engage in social support. It's about using certain strategies and tools like mindfulness and meditation and prayer and exercise, all those good things that we know we should do. Those are adaptive coping mechanisms. So healthy coping is the ability to exert at least some control by using make of something adaptive in your life and in the circumstances. It's of course not always possible to change a situation. Sometimes we are powerless to what has happened in the world around us. But part of adaptive coping is active coping. And what that basically means is even if there's nothing that you can do something. It might be trivial and small, like the mental processes that we talked about. Thinking patterns, what am I aiming at? So active coping is that despite my powerlessness, I still have intrinsic abilities within my body and mind and brain to make certain changes. Because remember what we said, experiences does have influence on the mind and brain, but also the opposite is true. My mind can be applied to manage situations. And it's about skillfully and consciously doing that. So you can also see there's maladaptive strategies. And maladaptive coping strategies is a lot about avoidance. It's about avoiding to deal with feelings, people, situations. It's where we're scared of our personal development and growth. And also in the midst of COVID, avoidance has become a little bit of a difficult thing for us as psychologists, because on the one hand, of course, there's social distancing. We need to not engage as much with life. It's important. We need to adhere to those restrictions and rules. But at the same time, we want to encourage people to deal with, to step into life, to deal with themselves and their bodies, and to deal with feelings. Because avoidance can really be disastrous in terms of our mental health and impeding on our personal growth. So when we talk about maladaptive or bad coping strategies, I mean, it makes me really think about this quote by James Hollis, which really just captures it for me. He says that life's two biggest threats we carry within, fear and lethargy. Those perverse twins munch on our souls every day. No matter what we do, they will turn up again tomorrow. And over time, they usurp more days of our lives than those to which we lay fair claim. So think about that. Lethargy and fear, both of them paralyze. Fear can paralyze. Lethargy paralyzes. I think it was Arthur Schopenhauer that also said, I think he said fear and boredom. So you can see it's two different types of emotions that inhibits us from engaging in life. It intimidates us back into our convenient rituals, convenient thinking patterns, familiar surrounding. It just keeps us in our comfort zone. And of course, our homes are comfort zone, but we're talking about our psychological comfort zones. Our growth area is always out of our comfort zone. So the effects of fear and lethargy can emerge or can come up in our lives in different ways. But it's ultimately about avoiding life, backing down from responsibility and disengaging. So in a quick reflection, you don't have to remember all of this, but I want you to see is what we focused on the importance of feeling loss, sitting with it. That coincides with reflection on the past, because there's valuable lessons to be learned for the present. It can be applied in the present to change our futures. We have to revisit our values. We have to think about what we aim at, especially from a psychological perspective. Where is my mind focused at? What is my mind aimed at? And ultimately, think about how we act in the world, how we carry ourselves, and how we adapt to life, and how that affects our well-being. This next part, as I move to conclusion, I really reflected quite a lot about the work of these two people that I'm going to share with you just now, amidst the whole COVID pandemic. So I want to briefly talk about two people that had a profound impact, and there's many people like that. These two people just really spoke to me over the course of my life. But they had a profound impact on humanity and humanity's losses, how people have suffered. So the first person is Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychiatrist. And the other was Joseph Campbell that I introduced just now. He was a professor, American professor of literature. First, we'll focus a little bit on Frankl. And Frankl developed what we call logotherapy. It's just a psychotherapeutic model. Logotherapy means, or is eccentrically about man's ability to find meaning and purpose in life. Logos refers to meaning, so it's meaning therapy, if you can call it that. And there's a nice quote about Viktor Frankl: when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are ultimately challenged to change ourselves. And you can see how that also relates to what we said earlier. So, again, like I said, ultimately for Viktor Frankl, life was about finding meaning and purpose. I have to say it before I forget, is that Viktor Frankl did not say that meaning is solely derived from suffering. But he said suffering is inevitable. And because we need to suffer, we need to make meaning. That's our best alternative, if we think about it. He also said that meaning can be derived from wonderful and pleasurable activities in our life, of course. But if we need to suffer, and we will suffer, the best strategy is to find meaning in that. So Frankl ultimately believed that each person has a unique ability, an irreplaceable human ability, that within its own existence, to make free choices, that we have ability to choose how we live life. And he said it's not only a choice, it's a responsibility to make choices. So he said that while we're free to make choices about how we respond to life, our ultimate need and ability is also then to find meaning in the choices that we make or the life that we live. We have to answer to the daily demands and do it purposefully and intentionally. He said that because we're motivated to find meaning. Again, he said it's our responsibility to find meaning. And what he believed about human beings is that he said that humans have the ability to learn from their mistakes. Just like we said when we talked about reflection, we have to put our failings into perspective for future use. And he also said, luckily we have a sense of humor. Sometimes we have to look back and just laugh at ourselves and use humor skillfully to do that. He also said that we are conscious beings. And because we're conscious beings, we have the ability to reflect. He said that we have the ability to love. And because we love, we find ourselves in other people. We encounter people. And we get to develop a purpose that is behind us. So to love is to find a purpose also behind ourselves, in somebody else. And then he also said we all have a passion for a cause. We all want to seek something outside of ourselves. He said he believes that human beings ultimately wants to change the world. And in Frankl's work, he talked about three main ways, and there's many more, but I'm just going to stick to that for now. He said that there's three main ways that we can find meaning in. The one is our work, creation and work. He said that by putting ourselves and our energy into something meaningful, creative, work-related, we essentially find our purpose. So work gives us meaning. Creating something makes us meaningful. And from a psychological perspective, we know that if people feel they add value, if they are validated in the work, if somebody tells you, yes, you did well, and congratulations, and I'm proud of you, and wow, look at what you do, it really stimulates our brains, and we feel better. There's a lot of nice neurochemicals that's secreted in the brain when we feel productive and useful and valuable. When something of what we created was seen and validated and valued in the world. And then he also said the second way of finding meaning and purpose is through love and encountering. Love is ultimately through loving a person or people. But to me, encountering really stuck, because encountering is about something else. It can also be about love and people. But it's about the beauty in the world. It can be about art, culture, nature. And he said that in that we need to really drive ourselves into and find meaning, purpose, and beauty in those things. And I think all of us, especially living in such a beautiful country, know that we've experienced something magical. We've encountered something magical, sometimes in the midst of a beautiful sunset, or sitting around a campfire with friends and family. There are many, many ways of encountering life to find purpose and meaning. Of course, we can't travel, but I remember when I was very young, traveling to Europe, one of the most profound experiences was experiencing culture there. Cathedrals and churches, just sitting in them and being in awe of the wonders of the world. That is encountering. And then lastly, it is our attitude. According to Viktor Frankl, attitude is essential in terms of finding meaning and purpose. And I hope that you've seen what we've addressed, touch ultimately on that, on how we change our way of making meaning, our attitude, our aim and purpose, our mental aim and purpose. So this is what Viktor Frankl said, and you're welcome to read up on his work because it's really beautiful. And Viktor Frankl, together with Schopenhauer, and I've quoted him before, also said something that was quite beautiful. He said, mostly it isn't loss. Mostly it is loss which teaches us about the worth of things. Because loss makes us see the opposites in life. It makes us see beauty and ugliness, love and pain. So in the paradox or the opposites, we really start appreciating the beauty of life. If we did not have pain and loss, I'm not sure if we would value love and connection as much. The second person's work that I want to share with you is that of Joseph Campbell. I said he was an American professor of literature. And he worked a lot on comparative mythology and then also religion, comparative religion. So what he did was he studied mythical stories and religious context and stories over centuries and centuries. So he was not interested in how these stories about life, stories in different cultures and in different religions was different. He was interested in how they are the same, what are the similarities in them. And he ultimately came up with what is called the hero's journey. So, and again, when we refer to hero, please, it's male and female. We know that we've got a lot of female heroines in the world. So both of them has written extensively, both Frankl and Campbell, and also then Carl Jung, another psychiatrist work that I value quite a lot, has written extensively about hero's journey. And the hero's journey is about people's journey, as you will ultimately see. Because in these stories, we see that there's this golden thread that runs through every story, every profound and meaningful story of life. So these stories, and when we talk about myths, please don't think it's untrue stories. It's stories with a deep meaning. They've got a psychological undercurrent. There's something profoundly hidden and valuable in these stories that we need to see and make conscious for us to get and understand about life. So it's a process that's relevant to humanity and humanity's suffering, humanity's journeys, and ultimately humanity's way of making meaning in life. So what this hero journey is about, it's very complex. I'm really just going to simplify it. But it's a common template that starts with a person, a hero. We're calling this ordinary person a hero. He goes on some kind of quest, possibly adventure, but the hero doesn't always see this as adventure. And on this quest, he experiences a decisive crisis. Because often the hero is not called willingly. The hero just needs to go because there's kind of no choice in it. But ultimately, as the hero goes through these transformations, something is transformed in him or her. So it's absolutely a developmental transformation. And what Campbell pointed out is this is kind of a roadmap. So you can see a little bit of Campbell's stages of the hero's journey, and you don't have to remember it. The only thing that I would like you to see is there's some kind of departure. There's some kind of separation from life as you know it, from the world that he or she knew. And he's leaving the comfort zone. And in the second stage, when the hero enters the world, the unknown world, there's a series of challenges, trials and tribulations that the hero encounters. And the hero is really tested to its core, to his or her core. The hero does not succeed in all the challenges that he or she meets, but the hero moves forward. The hero really moves through these stages. It wrestles, he or she wrestles with life. And on this journey, The hero might encounter allies and enemies, mentors and guides, spiritual encounters. This unknown world has a lot of experience and challenges for the hero. So if we think about the last 2 years, we know that all of us had to, well, we had to stay at home, but we had to leave our psychological homes, our way of knowing and looking at life as we previously knew it. That is definitely, it was a call for all of us to kind of go on some kind of adventure or quest. But it did push all of us in some kind of crisis. We had to move our comfort zones. It was not easy, and it definitely was not willing. But I think what is important is that the hero does not always need to be somebody who's incredibly brave and just willing to take on everything. The hero is also scared. And as I said, all of us were scared. We still are. But we had to go through this journey. We had to encounter ourselves. We had to encounter humanity, and we probably saw the best and the worst of humanity, but ultimately also from ourselves. We all went through trials and tribulations. And just as the hero in Campbell's, the hero's journey, return changed. All of us had to return changed. All of us were pushed into some kind of developmental, psychological, or spiritual growth. And we know there's been many heroes in this COVID pandemic. And our nurses and our doctors and our policemen and our firefighters, other healthcare professionals has been amazing. They are ultimate heroes. There's no doubt about that. They've engaged in so many remarkable and noble and selfless acts, and they should be celebrated. They are true heroes. However, Campbell and Jung also says, but there's another type of hero. They call this hero the everyday hero. This hero evolves and reacts to the current crisis, whether the crisis is a home crisis or a more global crisis. It's not necessarily earthquakes and tsunamis that this everyday hero responds to, but more to the everyday life challenges that we all face. Ultimately, this hero is also the hero that can sit with him or herself. This hero confronts the self. This hero becomes conscious, he or she reflects. They discover their internal world. Because we know that it's not always pleasant to see the self. It's not always pleasant what you find when you look into yourself. And I want you to see that this hero is you. All of us was called upon in this time to confront ourselves and to confront the world in a crisis that we were maybe not prepared for. But you do not need to be one of the frontline fighters to be a hero. You can and you are a hero if you're willing to engage in these processes of self-reflection. This act of heroism also happens not where everybody sees it and celebrates it. It happens while you drive your kids to school, or while you're busy washing the dishes, or when you feed the dog. These acts of heroism happens in everyday life, and it's not celebrated by other people. Nobody's going to give you a medal for it, but it has got a profound impact on you and ultimately on society. Because it's difficult to wrestle with our inner demons. It's difficult to learn from our own mistakes. It's very self-sacrificial at times, because this hero does not shine. I think these acts of heroism is important because we often deny or minimize its importance. And I see it as when you start in your most inner circle, the self, it reflects on the people that you deal with immediately, your family members, your kids, your partner, your extended family. It filters out and ripples out to how you deal with your colleagues, how you deal with other people around you, how we deal with each other as a nation. And if we start with the internal transformation, we can ultimately change outwardly and have an influence on the outside world. I want to share these two quotes by both Carl Jung and then Joseph Campbell. Heroic demands makes banal demands upon our patience, our devotion, our perseverance, and self-sacrifice. And for us to fulfill these demands, as we must, humbly and without courting applause through heroic gestures, a heroism is needed that cannot be seen from the outside. It does not glitter, it's not belauded, and it always seeks concealment and everyday attire. Joseph Campbell wrote, "It is not society that is to guide and save this creative hero, but precisely the reverse. And so every one of us shares the supreme ordeal, carries the cross of the Redeemer, not in the bright moments of his tribe's great victories, but in the silences of his personal despair." Isn't that profound? So, what is important as this hero of our time, you, the hero, has got moral courage, not necessarily physical courage. He or she's got an internal orientation and starts here before he or she points fingers to the world out there. Because this hero confronts inner realities, sometimes inner realities that's really fearsome. And it's because this hero have understanding and grace for the self that the hero can tolerate and engage with other people that he or she differs with. So this hero is not pleasure-seeking, but is living a life that seeks fulfillment and joy in a different level. He or she questions the importance of power and prestige and reflects upon it and compares it to the more smaller things in life, but that has a bigger ripple effect. So the question is, can these invisible or nearly invisible acts of heroism change our world? Can change our nation? I think absolutely so. Because it's only, and many psychologists and even spiritual leaders have said that, by discovering your own inner world, only by understanding the self, only then can you have empathy and understanding for other people. Only then you can have tolerance. Only then you can have a deeper appreciation for diversity. Because this everyday hero champions things like biointegrity, ecological health, global unity. It champions economic and cultural organizations. It sees the bigger picture by starting with the self. So it doesn't have great ambition solely for power or prestige, but it's about peace and harmony. So in conclusion, I think what is important for us to hear that all of us has been on a journey, a very, very demanding journey. And we all should reflect on what we're going to do with what we've learned about ourselves and life in this journey. All of us should kind of push forward to make our own life, but also the world out there, more spiritually and maybe psychologically significant. Because the modern hero finds significance in meaning, and it seeks for meaning and purpose, not through avoidance or ignorance, and not through arrogance. This hero is incredibly brave, because braveness does not mean we are not scared. We can still have fear despite being courageous. So through taking personal responsibility and finding purpose and meaning, this everyday hero plays a vital role in everyday things, and ultimately it flows out into the world. This is how we better our world. So my fellow heroes and my fellow Namibians, may we all move forward courageously, consciously, purposefully in this land of the brave. Thank you very much.
I'm not not sure if there are any questions for you. Any questions, anyone? Okay. I was ready with the sanitizer and the cloth to wipe and
You can sanitize me if that is, that is what you need to do.
all right. So there are no questions for Heidi? Are you sure? Any burning questions, more questions? Okay. Well presented. Thank you so much, Heidi.
It's my pleasure.
Really, really appreciate that. Yeah, she's a clinical psychologist, so see her in your own time. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. There are some snacks outside before you leave. Please make sure not to leave without eating, please. Fill your bellies for this Thursday. And then, yeah, keep in touch. Thank you so much for being here. From us, Capricorn Group, just keep a lookout on social media for the next Inspire session. Thank you.
Thank you.